I got to set you up with a conversation with Glenn. So here he is with his headphones on doing Morse intercept, and he was working overnight, like 11 to 7 or whatever, that, the wee hours of the night. And he had gone to Oktoberfest and had some good beer and had some good food and thought he would take a nap. And he didn't. And so he reported to work a little sleep deprived, had some alcohol, and was listening to a tank battalion or whatever it was, these
Russian
tank, Russian armored, division or whatever it was in Vladivostok, communicating in Moscow, and he was copying. And the guy in Vladivostok wasn't very good at Morse code, and they sent a message, and Glenn had copied it. And the Vladivostok guy said, "Send again." I, repeat it. Glenn was just going, God, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. And he's listening to the Morse code, and it's late at night, and he's in a dim room, and the Morse code lulls you into an altered state. And as the code was being broadcast, it put him in an almost asleep, and he saw the Russian in his uniform keying the code. And his supervisor kicked him and said, "Wake the F up. What are you doing?" Fall asleep. And he said, "Oh, I saw the guy." And his supervisor said, "Excuse me?" And he realized, I shouldn't have said that. He said, "I could see the Russian."
Well, Dick, it's good to meet you virtually.
Sean Patrick Hazlett, nice to see you. I know you've been around, but this is our first time communicating together. So welcome to Future Forecasting Group. And we like your work, and we're excited to do some really interesting things. You're the host for our new remote viewing, which we call the Blue Team, which is Brian, Sean, Derek, and Evan. And they've done some good work already. It's going to be really good stuff.
Yeah, as long as this doesn't appear before the next one we record, which is, I don't want to front run it. So
yeah,
I'm assuming this will appear after that one, right?
Yeah, we'll hold off for a little while. What we're talking about is the double-blind protocol that when the team gets tasked a target, they don't know who tasked it. They don't know anything about it. They're only given a target ID. And when they do the recording, they're still blind when they present their work. Let's go back a little bit. What's your background? How did you get involved in this type of stuff? And what have you been doing?
So it has been a very long time coming, because based on my prior profile, I'm like the last possible person that would be kind of in the remote viewing space. Well, sort of yes and no. So I originally am from Wilmington, Delaware. I went to Stanford undergrad, majored in electrical engineering, which is, about as far away from remote viewing as possible, except for the protocol. It's actually very, at least the CRV protocol is very engineering kind of like. But I also majored in history as well. I spent 5 years in the U.S. Army. I was assessed as a military intelligence officer. That's where I kind of, maybe I could have intersected with remote viewing at some point. But I was part of this program called Branch Detail. So what the military intelligence branch does in the Army is they throw their cubs to the lions, basically. So I was branch detailed as an armor officer. So I spent all of my time at the National Training Center, the U.S. Army's National Training Center, training U.S. forces for combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. And what my goal was basically the Army's RID team. So I became an expert on Soviet at the time, which subsequently morphed into Russian doctrine and tactics. And we had vehicles that looked like T-80s and BIMPs, BMPs, all that stuff. So that's what I did for about 4 years. And then in February of 2022, the way a branch detail program works is you, for all intents and purposes, you're an armor officer or you're a combat arms officer, and you just go to their schools, do everything the same. So I had no military intelligence experience whatsoever. But in February of 2002, we basically at that point had made the decision to invade Iraq. Like all the stuff you saw on the news and like going to the UN, all like that stuff's just pageantry as far as I'm concerned. But in February 2002, I was put on something called stop loss because on paper I was a military intelligence officer. So I spent an extra year in the military, got a TSSCI clearance, but never was trained in military intelligence or did anything with that.
Wow, that I guess that sounds like the military. You're a military intelligence officer. Okay, go play with tanks. So
yeah, well, it was actually for a military intelligence officer, if they were going to loan you to another branch, it was actually the best possible place they could put a military intelligence officer because I learned how to think and fight like the Russians. So when they invaded Ukraine, when everybody was screaming, you know, it's not going to happen, this and that, I just looked at a map, saw that they had pushed all their forces forward. And I'm like, these guys are going to attack 100% likelihood.
Yeah.
So after that, I got out of the military. I went to get additional degrees. So I went to Harvard Business School, and then I also went to the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Harvard Business School, kind of like my engineering degree, was for more practical purposes to kind of make the debt that I took on make sense. And then the Kennedy School was something I wanted to do long term, which was defense policy, things like that. And my thesis advisor was Dr. Ash Carter. And your thesis is typically you take on a client as opposed to write a thesis and you solve a problem. So my problem was what to do about Iran's nuclear weapons program. And that was in 2006.
Yeah.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
Yeah, it was 2006, so like long before what just happened. And my client was Ambassador Nick Burns, who at the time was number 3 at the State Department. Now he is the ambassador to China, last time I checked. So pretty interesting stuff. My thesis advisor was Ash Carter, who ultimately became, I think it was like 8 years later, he became Obama's Secretary of Defense.
Yeah.
So I got to see how all that policy was made. And yeah, it was just kind of an interesting experience. Upon graduation.
What was your solution to the Iran nuclear?
So what my focus was on Plan B. Plan A was a negotiated agreement. Plan B was what to do if there was no negotiated agreement. So it had 2 prongs. There was the coercive branch, which is prevent them from getting one. And then there was, call it the adaptive branch. What would policy solutions be if they got the bomb? What would you have to do in that scenario? And what we were worried about was a proliferation spiral. So if the Iranians get one, then the Saudis are going to want to get one. And every regime in the Middle East would likely go after it. So on the coercive branch, what's scary is when I recommended this stuff, the Bush administration literally started walking down the ladder and doing all the recommendations. It's very weird how policy is made in this country, but you'd be surprised how close academia is fused with government. Or maybe not so surprised. But the first step was political sanctions. So travel bans, visa rejections, asset freezes of key leaders. The second part was sanctions, so economic path. So what I did is I just identified where Iran was critically short and relied for things for their economy to process. So for instance, they're not very good at refining, like gasoline, having gasoline. They're great at extracting oil from the ground, but they need processing.
They need to process it, to refine it.
So like targeting things like that. And there are other various goods that I think there's like heavy machinery they would get from Europe. So I just kind of had a list of who they were dependent on, what specifically they were dependent on, and then part of it was politically just getting the European countries on board, et cetera. And then the final.
Did your analysis go as far back as like in the 1950s, Mossadegh, when the CIA overthrew them, the Shah, the whole? I was alive in 1979, when they took over the embassy. Did you go back historically to their mindset of how they.
Not so much the mindset, but only insofar as what precedent campaigns or operations, particularly when I got into the military side, we had considered or executed upon. So there was something called, it's either Op Plan 5026 or 5027. I told a friend who's a stealth bomber pilot, I just blurted that out loud, and he's just like, oh my God, you can't talk about that, it's classified. I'm like, it's on Wikipedia, man. So there was a operation for a precision strike on the Yongbyon reactor back with, North Korea back in 1994. And Dr. Ash Carter had been the one who kind of wrote that, or either wrote, supervised, or led that war plan. And that was a case where we were just going to focus on that key reactor to entomb the uranium that was there. The problem is when you do that, you had to also make sure that the Tomahawk cruise missile that you were using successfully entombed the uranium, so there wasn't a radioactive plume that blew south into South Korea. So it took into account all that. So I looked at that in terms as one option, because again, you had the political stage, the economic stage.
They're going to launch one cruise missile or several cruise missiles that will explode this and then entomb it at the same time, and entomb it in such a way that nothing can escape.
That's right. At least that was the plan.
Strike, it would seem to me.
Back in 1994 too. So fortunately, that didn't happen. Right? We didn't have to execute on that operation. But when I looked at the military side, because again, you start with political sanctions, then economic sanctions, and then you start to explore military options if they're still continuing the development. And that particular operation is one of the things that I looked at as a precedent operation for Iran. The problem with Iran is that everything's spread out. So you can't quite get away with it. The second thing that I looked at was more of a comprehensive bombing campaign, because once you start bombing, they're going to try to move things around and do all sorts of things. So once you start bombing, you would have to continuously bomb to ensure that they don't reinstate the program, which is why the thing that just recently happened, A, didn't destroy everything they would need to destroy, and B, the fact that there's no follow-up means that I think all we did is gave Iran an incentive to make sure that they developed the bomb. I think it was probably more of a psychological operation just to stop the Iranians from destroying Tel Aviv. Because what most people don't know in the media is that the cost of an interceptor missile dwarfs the cost of a ballistic missile.
That war was not going as well for Israel as we were led to believe. No. And the Iranians had plenty of ballistic missiles. I think given 2-3 more weeks, the Israelis would have run out of interceptors and Tel Aviv would have been destroyed. So I think that whole bombing campaign was just to send Iran a message. We probably called them in advance and say, hey, we're going to have a photo op with some stealth bombers over the Fordo complex. Just make sure you get all your people out in time so that nobody has to die. And then the Iranians gave us a call after that and said, hey, we've got to respond and retaliate, move your guys. Yeah.
That's what it felt like to me. I can't be 100% sure, but that's...
Well, that was reported in the news that their retaliation was, we'd moved everybody out. Wow.
And I think that was just a catalyst to just stop the kind of the interchange between Israel and Iran.
Well, you should have a conversation with Glenn Wheaton, my remote viewing instructor, who was in U.S. Army Special Forces intelligence. And he was a high-speed Morse intercept operator during the Cold War in Augsburg, Germany. So they were worried about...
Was he there in 1983?
Earlier than that. Well, 83. I think he was in Hawaii in 83. So a little earlier, it would have been late 70s, right around 1980. So he's working at the field state at this giant antenna array in Augsburg. And that was the days of worrying about the Fulda Gap, speaking about Russian armor, And so he was...
By the way, that was my unit, the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment. That was the unit that defended the Fulda Gap on the U.S. side.
Oh, you would have a great, I got to set you up with a conversation with Glenn. So here he is with his headphones on doing Morse intercept, and he was working overnight, like 11 to 7 or whatever that, the wee hours of the night. And he had gone to Oktoberfest and had some good beer and had some good food and thought he would take a nap. And he didn't. And so he reported to work a little sleep deprived, had some alcohol, and was listening to a tank battalion or whatever it was, these
Russian.
Russian tank, Russian armored, division or whatever it was in Vladivostok, communicating to Moscow, and he was copying. And the guy in Vladivostok wasn't very good at Morse code, and they sent a message, and Glenn had copied it. And the Vladivostok guy said, "Send again." I, repeat it. Glenn was just going, "God, this guy doesn't know what he's doing." And he's listening to the Morse code, and it's late at night, and he's in a dim room, and the Morse code lulls you into an altered state. And as the code was being broadcast, it put him in almost asleep, and he saw the Russian in his uniform keying the code. And his supervisor kicked him and said, "Wake the F up. What are you doing? Fall asleep." And he said, "Oh, I saw the guy." And his supervisor said, "Excuse me?" And he realized, I shouldn't have said that. He said, "I could see the Russian." And the supervisor went, "Well, let me look. Standard operating procedure. Give me your badge. You're relieved. Go over here." And he thought, "Oh man, I'm in trouble." And they sent him to 2 days of psychological review, had him sign a form that you've had this experience. You can't talk about it with anybody under pain of prison and, great fine. And they said, "Okay, go back to work." And when he went in, they said, "Wait here." He said, "Oh, I've been cleared." They said, "Oh, no, you're coming here now." And they took him down a hallway and punched in a code, said, "Memorize the code," and said, "You had this experience. Now what we want to do is there are radio broadcasts to number stations where they would broadcast a German phrase, and then they'd put out numbers, and it would be a broadcast code to a spy." And that was the genesis of remote viewing, that they knew that listening to Morse codes lulled people into this altered state where they had this little psychic experience. So they were looking for people who had that. And that was the genesis of remote viewing. And from there, he was recruited for Special Forces Intel, and they developed the form of remote viewing that you'd have a really good conversation with him with your background.
The interesting thing about Augsburg is that that's also the location in 1983 that Lynn Buchanan fried. And I'm not sure exactly when the timeline is, because that's also the same year that they had Operation Able Archer, which almost resulted in nuclear war between the United States and Russia.
What was Able Archer? I'm not familiar with that.
It was this massive military exercise that the United States was involved in kind of planning for a potential war in continental Europe. And the Russians were really twitchy about it. But it got to the point where it was one of those instances where it was the highest probability of potential nuclear conflict between those two nations during the Cold War. And it's also just happens to coincidentally or not so coincidentally be the same year that Lynn Buchanan fried all the skiffs on both sides of the Iron Curtain. So you imagine if you're the Russians, you see this massive buildup of U.S. forces in Europe, and then all of a sudden all your skiffs go out for some unknown reason. But again, I don't know if those two events were synchronous or not, right? And when I asked Lynn that question, his face got beet red, and he didn't say anything
talk
more
about that.
No, he didn't even say that. He was just like, I mean, I'm not a kid anymore, but how the hell did this kid figure this out?
Yeah. Well, interesting time frame, and a lot of interesting stuff came out. So now a lot of that's come out into the civilian world, and here we are. I trained with Glenn I've been training with him since 97. So, 28 years now. So you were doing podcasts on the unusual, the paranormal. How did?
Yeah, so that's also a strange, windy road. So I'm also a science fiction and horror writer, right? So I have published maybe 50 plus short stories, but I focus on where paranormal and geopolitics, not always, but usually where they intersect. So I had an anthology coming out where I was the editor, and it was my second anthology, but I learned that I could market it via YouTube. So I started this channel. It had like 4 focuses. It's since been narrowed down to 2 because those 2 worked the best. But initially, I was just interviewing fiction writers on those topics, essentially. And then I think I had read Psychic Warrior in 2018, and I stumbled across a video of David Morehouse online, and I'm like, this guy's still around. And when I read the book, his military background clearly checked out, and he was a combat arms officer like I was, so we kind of spoke the same language. So I just reached out to him on a whim and said, hey, I'd love to interview you. So the first time we spoke, I think we were on a Zoom for about 8 hours.
Yeah.
So we just really got along. So I started learning more of the insights on remote viewing, and that's kind of the direction that the channel went in. I still do some geopolitics. I also started the channel at the same time. A month later, Putin invaded Ukraine, so I was able to correctly predict, just based on analytics, what was going to happen. And, of course, much of it did. The only place I was wrong is I thought Ukraine would fold in about 6 weeks.
A week, yeah.
I thought it was longer, about 6, but I was still wrong on that. And then I started interviewing more remote viewers from the original program. And then, I started tuning into other aspects of, call it the paranormal, supernormal, whatever you want to call it. So UAPs and any number of other topics on ESP, kind of psychic abilities, things like that. And when you start, we call it the broader phenomenon, right? I don't pretend to know what causes any of this, but I do know that there are elements of it that are absolutely real. And sometimes, I think, as Nietzsche said, when you stare into the abyss, sometimes the abyss stares back. And, just there's a number of things that start to happen to you when you look into this stuff. And most of it is easily, plausibly deniable. But when you kind of add up all the things that start to happen, you realize it's real, but you can't really, it's very difficult to prove. So as an example, there's 3 things that that started happening to me. The standard synchronicities, right? People can plausibly deny, it can kind of, on each individual sort of incident, you can kind of ignore, but in the totality, it gets kind of strange. The second is maybe 3 to 4 documented instances of precognition, particularly precognitive dreams. The flavor of those tend to be stuff that you have nothing to do with. Like one example, and what I would do is I would just document it on my community tab on YouTube, just to say, look, this is the flavor of the dream. I don't know if it's precognitive or not, but it's not something I would normally dream about. So as an example, I had a dream of a labor strike in Missoula, Montana, right? Like that's kind of random. I had depictions of kind of the uniform and things like that. It was hunter green with white lettering was one, and there was like orange on another one. And then that was kind of in March. By December, there was a YouTube video by a local news station that there was a labor strike. It was Starbucks, right? Starbucks employees, which is the green and white. And then the second was Amazon employees, which is the kind of orange. They have like a black, orange, and white logo. So the first instance I had is I was dreaming about the philosophy of the Unabomber, which why would I be dreaming about the philosophy of the Unabomber? That's just weird, strange, and creepy. The next day I went downstairs to my office, looked at Twitter, and Ted Kaczynski had died that day. Documented, that was just the first time I realized these things happen. The third thing was this weird interaction with animals, particularly birds. So I've seen more great horned owls in the last 3 years than I've seen in my entire life.
Yeah, those are like omens. Those are symbolic. Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you my precognitive dream. In the summer of my senior year in high school, I would hang out at this swimming pool. My parents were in a country club, so I was hanging out at the swimming pool, and there was some guy from another school that I knew from there, and his nickname was like Frodo. Weird.
Was he short?
He was no, he wasn't. He was a pretty big guy. But I just kind of tangentially knew of him. I'd seen him, oh, that's so-and-so. And that fall, I met a girl from another high school and was my first love. Like I just fell head over heels, puppy love. It was the first time I was really in love. And I was dating her pretty regularly. And it was the week they would have a parent-teacher conference in midweek, sometime in September or October, where we would have a day off from school. So like Thursday was off. So I said, hey, Wednesday, let's go to a movie, let's go do something. She said, oh, I got to go see my grandmother. I went, oh, okay, I'll see you on the weekend. She said, yeah, I'll see you on the weekend. So I had a dream that I saw her with this guy. So I went and didn't mean anything to me. It was kind of a vivid dream. I went and picked her up and I said, God, I had dreamt about you the other night that you were with this guy, Frodo. And she said, why are you saying this? I said, it's just this dream. She said, why did you bring this up? I said, it's just this dream I had. It was.
Yeah, she probably thought you were messing with her, right? That I know what you did. But
are you accusing me of something? And I said, no. And she said, why are you? She goes, I was with him Wednesday night. And I went, oh. And I thought, that was a weird experience. And I just had to I know I dreamed that. How could I do that? I didn't know they knew each other. And it was like, I just put it on a shelf for many years until I became a remote viewer. So I think everybody's had moments like that. We're all psychic. We're all part of the greater consciousness. But
in the Eastern traditions, they're actually much better, at least kind of the masses are much better prepared for this stuff because they don't really deny it. But when people start meditating, particularly Westerners, they start to experience what an Eastern tradition would say are just cities, right? And they're kind of signs that you're on the path to enlightenment. You're not supposed to indulge in them. But synchronicities, precognition, all that stuff is expected in Eastern traditions when you're going through meditation. And when Westerners do it, they're freaked out because they're like, why is this happening? And it's just what happens.
Yeah. So you knew Edward Reardon? Who from our team had you interacted with? You hadn't interviewed me, but you'd done segments with Edward?
And Daz.
And Daz.
By the way, we need to do a segment with you on my channel. Absolutely, we need to do that. So
yeah. Oh, this isn't what I thought this was what we're doing, but I thought we were both going to use it. I mean, you can use it.
Yeah, well, I thought this was going to be about me. I just people on my channel don't want to hear about me.
Oh, okay.
I want to hear about you.
Well, let's talk about this target that I queued because I selected the target. I was the tasker, and I gave out the target ID. Let me look at this. V9W9-X4A1. That's what nobody knew what that was, and we gave it to the team that you're hosting. Brian, Derek, Sean, the other Sean yep. Mahoney, and Evan. So you debriefed them while they were still blind to this, and the target was the Tesla Optimus robot, the rollout of version 8, which is probably going to be a few years from now. What was your impression of the work, and what was your experience with that?
So the team, the way I looked at it is the impressions that I got were one viewer was like right on in the immediacy of like Tesla, got the headquarters. I drew a picture that looked almost exactly like the headquarters. So that's kind of one side of it. The second side was the other three were getting much more advanced views of what was going on several years down the lines, like the implications.
Yeah.
And the implications were
that's the
terrifying.
division of
Right.
that's called the division of effort in remote.
Yeah.
And we find that when you give a team, they'll like on a subconscious level in consciousness divide it up. Like, okay, I'll tell you the rollout and the nuts and bolts of the location of the headquarters, and then the others will get conceptual stuff, and the others will get other effects. So that's division of effort. Yeah.
The other interesting thing is there's stuff that you miss as an analyst that kind of emerges. It's like emergent analysis from collaboration or the synergy of all four of us interacting.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was really interesting I found was with Sean Mahoney. He saw these views of like these people who were operating on other people and were just didn't feel anything for them at all.
Well,
and then he realized maybe they're just working on the robots, and maybe that's not why. I mean, that's why they're not feeling anything.
Or it might be this, Sean. It might be this is what I'm hearing. This is not the remote viewing data. This is me talking with another source who knows the way things are rolling out. And that medical diagnosis is going to be conducted by AI and robotics. So you will have advanced robots that, if that's maybe what Sean Mahoney was seeing, was the robots that are just clinically diagnosing.
Mm-hmm.
And they have robotic surgery.
Yeah, the reverse of what I said. Exactly. Right.
Yeah. So it was a really interesting target.
The thing that scared me the most, though, was I think both Sean Mahoney and Derek saw this, were these. One of the internships I did when I was at the Kennedy schools, I worked at Booz Allen Hamilton, and I worked as an intelligence analyst. So this is just for a summer, and I worked on two projects. One was about kind of the future of China and different scenarios. The second was on some of the projects within national laboratories, particularly on MEMS and NEMS. So MEMS are micro electromechanical systems. So it could just be like your actuator in your iPhone, and then NEMS were nano electromechanical systems. So you could weaponize these things. But what they were seeing was kind of this merging, kind of call it cybernetic microorganisms, that you could put into somebody's system that could, again, it didn't go into much detail, but you could imagine it, right?
Yeah.
Where they work on blood vessels, et cetera. But it also had this effect similar to what you were talking about, unless that was intentional, which I don't know. I don't have a point.
15 years ago, nanotechnology, there was a lot of, it was the buzzword, and there were people doing interviews and talking about that. And then it just kind of fell off it reminds me of in the 1930s when nuclear fission, atomic energy, uranium was, you couldn't utter that word or you'd disappear. And nanotechnology kind of did the same thing. They didn't just go away, but they're not talking about it.
The last book series that I've seen in science, and I could be wrong, maybe people write routinely about it, was this book called Plague Year. And it was about a nanotech virus where the only way to stop it was to get above 10,000 feet. It had like a barometric pressure trigger. So, and that was horrifying too, because everything would just turn into gray goo because it would just eat you from the inside out. But one of the implications of this technology that they saw was people getting sick, not really knowing what was going on. And it could be that some of these things just fail.
I'm working on a book. I was working on a book. We should team up. You seem to be a more prolific writer than me. My book is a remote viewing novel, and it starts out with a Bulgarian and a Romanian who are hiding out in northern Thailand because they ripped off the Russian mafia for Bitcoin. They stole Bitcoin from the Russian mafia, and they're on the run. And they've run out of money. And they run into this old Intel guy who's retired. He's a retiree living in northern Thailand, and they're drinking with him. And he tells them a story about, I used to work with these special forces guys that were remote viewers. And they had this tones they could listen to. And it was on an old Walkman, like a way generation Walkman. If you listen to these tones, it would make you, put you into a brain state where you would be like the world's greatest remote viewer. And he goes, this special forces guy had this, and he died in a motorcycle wreck. And I have that device with the tones. And so they steal it from him. And then they learn about remote viewing, and they find a remote viewer, and they say, hey, we want to hire you, and they get to meet him. And so they have the remote viewer work some targets listening to his tones, and he's going, man, this is just full on the best remote viewing you can ever do. And so they say, we want you to work some targets for us. And they're paying him in Bitcoin. And so he's doing targets. He does a validation. It's really good. And so they bring in a Chinese lady, and they're having him do his session, and then they're translating it into Chinese. And what they're having him remote view is the Chinese reverse engineering UFOs. And they're going to shake down the Chinese saying, hey, we got to pay us money, or we're going to. And so he gets involved in this whole thing with reverse engineering UFOs, and then military U.S. intelligence. They see by his methodology, they figure out who he is. And then the Chinese woman, it's a real can of worms. So yeah, he gets in trouble with Chinese intel and U.S. intel, and they're on the run. And but they're remote viewing the Chinese secret space program. So it's a good story.
Yeah, that sounds intriguing. I have one that's about a crash retrieval inside Russia by a team from Delta. And
probably a true story.
Well, I conceivably, but I make it a little bit extra, right? Because I have the Chinese invading Russia to get to it, the Russians trying to get to it, and it ends up being a modern retelling of the 10,000, Xenophons. Yeah, where they just have to have to fight their way out of Russia with the Chinese forces, Russian forces, and something else that is novel, some sort of a novel intelligence.
Well, we got to get these written. They're all good stories.
Oh, it's done. I just have to revise it. I got close on 2 publishers, but they didn't buy it, so I'm just going to.
It's hard. Well, self-publish it.
I am. I would ultimately do that.
You self-publish it to Future Forecasting Group subscribers, and then they can. There's ways to do that now. So, well, we're going to have some interesting targets coming up, and we're really glad to have you with the team. I was thinking probably rotate hosts, like have Dennis Nappy host your team and you host the other team.
Yeah. I'd be happy to do that. Just because I'm very familiar with, as we discussed earlier.
Yeah, Daz and Edward already. So they're really good.
So I think Naeem was the only one I don't think I've.
Naeem is super cool. Naeem.
Well, you obviously haven't kind of interacted.
Naeem was. I used to do work with Courtney Brown, and Courtney would give out a free course, like learn to remote view here, and just sit here, learn it. And so Naeem was vociferously, just eating it up, trying to learn it. And Courtney Brown said, hey, there's this guy Naeem up in Canada, and he's really a bright young guy, and he really wants to learn remote viewing. Yeah, he has some questions. So I started emailing back and forth with Naeem, and he asked really good questions. Like he really asked good questions and listened. And I said, hey, man, I'll teach you. So I gave him some one-on-one training. And then over the years, he started sending me, look, I did this. And finally I said, hey, we need another guy on our team. Here, try to work this on the side. And he just worked his way in. So, and he's really good. He's real cool, real laid back guy, but very intelligent and a good remote viewer. Good teacher too.
So I've never had any formal training in remote viewing, but I've interviewed enough people, at least to know how the CRV protocol works. I have Morehouse's gigantic Ant Slayer book. But
Morehouse is one of the people who I greatly respect, and I've always interacted with his students. His students seem to have a good grip on things. They're knowledgeable and intelligent, and yeah, I have a lot of respect for Dave. I know Lynn Buchanan too, and Paul. I know all those guys. They're all good guys. Lynn Buchanan's really nice guy.
yeah, he's the nicest.
Morehouse, yeah, he's good. The real history of military remote viewing will never be told. There's a history there that there are remote viewers people have never heard about. There's programs people have never heard about. You know, if they get some fantastic new weapon that the Army gets, the Marines want it, the Navy wants it, the Air Force wants it. And so, yeah, there were other programs. The difference between what the Special Forces guys did was it's based on visual imagery. Like the first thing we do is write the target ID, close our eyes. So when you saw Sean Mahoney, the first thing he did on that robot was a humanoid.
I know.
Yeah. It's like, okay, that's the money shot right there. That's,
yeah.
So, and I don't do it every time. Like, God, it's really hard. But yeah, there's times when there's a movie playing there. I can see it. That's special.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too, because I agree with you. I think the Fort Meade group was the only one that appears to have been exposed. I think, very likely, as you mentioned, with Special Forces.
That was David Morehouse that outed
100%.
them, and he paid dearly for that. He paid.
They almost murdered him and his family. But the Chesapeake house.
No, I didn't. I know that they took away his pension and prosecuted him, but
which I think he was successfully able to fight.
Yeah, he won. He won that in the long run, but for years and years.
But there was
heavy price.
He had a home, I think, in Chesapeake, Maryland, or something like that, and his family was sleeping there. And it was during the winter. During the day, he would heat it up with a generator in his garage. So during the night, someone had kind of unhooked the carbon monoxide hose and just stuck it in the house. And if his cat hadn't jumped on him, the entire family would have died. So when they tried to investigate it, they just found 2 sets of footprints leaving his house. So when I talked to Lynn Buchanan about that, Lynn Buchanan said that was just a warning. He said if they had wanted him dead, he would be dead. So, yeah, some of the stuff you got to, at the end of the day, there's no incentive for the U.S. intelligence community to admit that this stuff works, because why would you want every housewife kind of reading in on what's going on in Langley, Virginia?
Well, I think the way they released it was they released a watered down version, and they kept it in the UFO community, and they put it out like end of the world prophecies, and they put it in a box and kept it over there. So, and that's what we're trying to do at Future Forecasting Group, is get it out of that box and do it responsibly and do it safely. Like, we have boundaries. We do. I've done targets where no, you're not going to publish that. So, okay, put it in a file, and it's not published. And we even have, our targets are vetted, so we don't, what we found, because we have members that are paying for it, we're not going to do a target and then say, oh, well, we're going to redact some of that. So a couple of times we redacted something, and they rightly were up in arms. So we don't redact anything. We're careful about the type of targets we do. So we're not going to do something that's national security or some hidden. But one opportunity we have is our source, who you've spoken to, our special source. He has information that he can't give us. But
we should talk offline about some of it, because I'm very, very intrigued by it.
But if we're tasked as a target and we get that data from remote viewing, that's like plausible deniability. He didn't tell us. We discovered it via remote viewing. So we can be pointed in certain directions, right? And that's the cool stuff that I like. Like, oh, what did you discover here? Well, it's just remote viewing. It may not even be true.
Yeah, come on, guys. It's not real, right? Like
Yeah,
it's just like the
a
drones.
remote viewing
FDA
experiment.
approved.
They
Yeah,
made it
FDA
up.
approved, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
FC, whatever it's called.
Well, we're going to have fun. This is good. We're really expanding the teams, and you're a great addition, Sean. I think we have to call you Sean Patrick because Sean Mahoney, we get our Sean's mixed up, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We should talk about your background, actually.
Well, I was a TV news reporter.
Well, where did you grow up? Like, where are you from originally?
I was from Detroit, Michigan. I was born in Henry Ford Hospital, and then I grew up in Birmingham, Michigan. When I was 10 years old, about the time of the Kennedy assassination and the Beatles. We moved to Salt Lake City, and my dad worked for U.S. Steel in public relations. So I grew up in Salt Lake City with the Mormons. I wasn't Mormon. And Salt Lake City was a pretty good party town in the 70s. Did TV news there for a number of years. And then in 85, I came to Hawaii. And when I came to Hawaii, I got off the plane. And I went, I'm home. I'm home. I'm not leaving. And so I flew back to Salt Lake City, packed up some stuff, and thought, I'm still in my 30s. I could pull this off. If I do, it'll be something. So I took videotapes of my work, and I flew back to Hawaii, got a little studio apartment, and dropped off videotapes at all the TV stations and went to the beach swimming. I got back from the beach. There was a note on my door. I didn't even have a phone yet. I had left the neighbor's phone. It said, Paul Udell, the news director at Channel 4, called. Please call him. Called him up. Yeah, can you come in? Went in, and he said, let me put you on camera and see if you can read teleprompter. Yeah. So they gave me a script. I said, okay, go. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dick Allgire, KITV4 News, the governor today. And he goes, that's enough. And, they hired me, and Hawaii is so interesting. I mean, the weather's great, but the mix of cultures. Have you been to Hawaii?
No, my family has. Everybody in my house has, except me. Well, I was working.
The Hawaiian culture is just beautiful. And we have Chinese culture, Japanese, Filipino, Korean. My wife is Korean, and they all intermingle. So you'll have people that are, one of my best friends is Filipino, Hawaiian, Chinese. And it's halfway to Asia, and it's kind of sort of like Asia here. Like there are, just up the street, there's a street where there are Korean stores with the signs in Korean, and they speak Korean. And it's just a beautiful place. It's a really wonderful culture. I love it.
Which island are you on?
Oahu. I'm in Honolulu.
Okay. Isn't there like a military base there?
Oh, there's the whole place. The whole thing is a military base. There's Hickam Air Force Base, Pearl Harbor.
Yep.
Kunia, a big secret NSA base. There is Kaneohe Marine Base. This whole island is a big.
Is Schofield Barracks there, or
Schofield Barracks? Yeah.
Okay.
Wheeler Field, Schofield Barracks. Yeah, 25th Infantry. So I heard about remote viewing on Art Bell. I was driving to work, listening to news radio on the way in, and on the way back, the Art Bell show was on after the late news at 11 at night. And I thought, this is an odd show. And I heard about remote viewing, and I thought, if that's true, I got to learn that. So I went to the Farsight Institute, took a course from Courtney Brown, which was based on CRV, and was dabbling with that a bit. And then I heard this guy giving a talk, a free lecture, who claimed to be a former military remote viewer. And Glenn Wheaton came out, and there were like 50 people there, and he held up his military ID card. He goes, I was in the military. I was in special forces in 22 years. And he said, the secret of the universe is communication. Everything communicates. There's a greater consciousness. And he gave this really interesting lecture. And he said, well, we're going to be teaching this for those of you that want to learn. It's Friday night, come to this classroom. And he wouldn't charge a penny. He never charged a thing. And the training went on for like years and years. It's like what he gave to us is such, the written manual would be hundreds of pages. And it works. It's good. So,
question is where did the U.S. military get it from?
Well,
I mean, one side is Ingo Swann,
yeah,
right, and Stanford Research Institute.
I'm about to do an interview with Mark Ireland, who's the son of Richard Ireland. Richard Ireland was, I think, the best psychic of his day. He was a psychic to a lot of Hollywood people, and he had a show here in Waikiki where he would do readings as a lounge act. And the special forces guys that were doing, they called it beaconing when they were trying to see the spies. And they were developing a methodology, and they had heard about Fort Meade, and there was some cross-pollination. So they went to see this guy's show, and Richard Ireland said, okay, at this point, I give it a challenge. If somebody holds up a bill, like a US dollar, $100, $50, $10, I guess it was $100 bill, if I give you the serial number, you give it to me. And Glenn went, okay, I got a $100 bill, I'll take that challenge. So he's holding a $100 bill. And Richard Ireland puts his mask on, and he draws on the board. He writes this serial number. And Glenn looks at it and goes, nope. You didn't get it. And Richard Ireland went, oh, I'm sorry, I wrote it backwards. Look and see if I wrote it backwards. And he had written like all the serial numbers backwards, and he got the $100 bill. So the Special Forces guys took him to Cunha, which is right next to Schofield, and they apparently paid him about $80,000, and they tested him. They put a blindfold on and then plaster cast over his eyes, made sure he couldn't see a thing, and then he could see stuff across the room, or they'd test him like he'd be able to, and he really was good. He did a thing on the Steve Allen show where he would put a blindfold on and he'd take envelopes, and the audience would write questions, and he'd pick an envelope and he'd go like this, and he'd go, there's someone named Susan. Susan, you're thinking of moving to Cincinnati. You're taking a new job. Yes, you should take that job. It's going to go well for you. And by the way, you're pregnant and you're going to have a beautiful daughter. And they'd go to some lady in the audience, and she'd like, my name's Susan. I just got a job offer in Cincinnati, and I'm trying to get pregnant, and like he was just uncannily accurate. He apparently, Glenn Wheaton had lost his father, and Glenn said, I don't know where my father went. And Richard Ireland said, well, he passed away, and he's at a cemetery in Connecticut. It's outside of this town. And if you go to the second plot on the third row, 4 over from the left, you'll find your father. And Glenn went and found his father's gravesite. That accurate. So they based what Richard Ireland said was, I have a place that I call Blackboard, where if I close my eyes and look up at an angle, I can generate images there from my subconscious. And so what the basis of the remote viewing that I do is you look on Blackboard and you write the target ID, and then you open your eyes and then you look and you train yourself to see imagery. And in the beginning, at the first part of a session, you're limited to about that long, second and a half. So the image is fleeting, and it's just, it's blurry, but it's, as you saw what Sean, when he drew that human form and it was the robot, it does work. And as you work the session longer and longer, you become fatigued and you get better target contact. And pretty soon you can look for about 10 to 15 seconds. And then after you've done a 45 to an hour minute session, you progress into ERV, where you put down your pen and you do a visualization, and the idea is to pop on target and have a visual experience.
And one on kind of the initial, they would call it controlled remote viewing or coordinate remote viewing, or the Hawaiian Remote Viewing Guild, Remote Viewers
HRVG, method. That's right. Yeah.
And all three of them, you'd be in kind of alpha wave state. ERV, I think, right?
David Morehouse is big on ERV. Yeah, that's his specialty.
ERV, you go into theta. I think you start to dip into theta.
Yeah. So the HRVG method starts in beta. So you're totally awake. You're engaged. It's like you're doing a math problem or the New York Times crossword puzzle. Your brain is firing in a fully awake state, and you're looking for a second, and then you're making the spontaneous ideogram, and then you're probing that for low-level data, and you get low-level sensory data, but you're in beta. You're completely engaged. And then as the session progresses, about 40 minutes in, you get to this stage called S4 Cascade, where now you're kind of daydreaming. You're in alpha. You're more at target than you forget about your surroundings. It's like when you read a book and you don't know you're turning the pages, you're caught up in the story. So you work that, and then eventually, you drive yourself. You want to be in a inclined orbit at theta, where you're being monitored, where you go down to theta like you're just almost asleep and you have target data, and then you come back up into lower theta or even alpha, and you report back, and then you go back down, and it's this series of little naps where it comes to you. It's a really brilliant method that they came up with. It's quite ingenious, and it's not something you can learn in a weekend or a week. No. I studied years. I mean, it was a couple of years before I had the first time I did it and saw a little movie, I went like, what the heck was that? Was that a dream? Was that a hallucination? And I got the target feedback, and I realized I had seen it, and I went, oh my God, everything's recorded. Everything we do can be perceived by somebody else. There's no secrets. So, yeah. Cool stuff.
And how did you, going back to your story, so you met Glenn, and he kind of trained you to do this for a while.
He gave classes, and he formed there was a woman named Yana Allen who kind of spearheaded the classes, and she rented the place, she bought tables, and we paid like $25 a month to buy pens and fanfold paper. Like, I still use it. We use fanfold computer paper to do session. To this day, I still go buy boxes of that stuff. It's hard to get, but yeah. So we'd buy paper and pens, and Glenn would come and give us a lecture every week, a different lecture, and taught us. And this went on for years. And we formed groups, and we formed operational groups, and we did projects, and we did really interesting things. Really interesting projects.
Now, you were a broadcaster at the same time.
I had this secret life. Like, I was consumed by remote viewing, and being a TV reporter, it's pretty interesting on most days. On some days, it's really interesting. Some days, it's a little tedious. Like, the Teamsters, bus drivers are on strike. They're going to give a statement, go stand by, and you're waiting outside an office for nothing to happen. Then they come out and they say, it's like you wait.
Hurry up and wait. Yeah, hurry up and wait.
But you go meet interesting people, or they'll say, hey, the volcano's going off, go fly to the volcano. And like, oh, I get to go see the volcano. That's cool. But I was at the same time doing remote viewing and not telling my colleagues about it. But we were getting really good. Like, we worked there was an infamous case of a young boy that he disappeared, and the parents said, oh, we took him to Auntie so-and-so's house, and we don't know, he disappeared. And they knew the parents had killed him. But where's Peter? Everybody had these bumper stickers. Where's Peter Kemma? So we worked that as a target because Glenn knew one of the private investigators on the case, and we gave them data, and the private investigators were impressed with our work. And that led us to a missing persons detective on the Honolulu Police Department. And we did a case for him and really pretty much solved the case. And the missing man's mother came out and we gave her the presentation. She goes, he went hiking. Our data showed that he had been hiking in the mountains and he never came back, and they thought maybe he got abducted by drug dealers or ran in by locals. But what we saw was he slipped and fell down the hill into an inaccessible place. So here we were doing missing persons cases for this detective, and I'd go to news conferences where the detective would be there, and I'd be there as a newsman, and he'd go, pretend you don't know me. Yeah, okay. And then after the news conference, go, hey, we just got some new data on this one. So it was a fun double life. Like, you don't want to be the newscaster who is like, Mr. Credibility. Yeah, I'm a psychic in my spare time. Yeah,
right.
I just went to Mars last week and saw an ancient civilization. Like, no, that doesn't fly.
Yeah, it's a little easier. Like at this stage in my career, because without going too much into it, I work in finance, that kind of thing. I don't care. Like, I'm not trying to convince other people.
Yeah.
It's just like, look, I'm not trying to convince you. I know this stuff is real. So,
yeah. Did you get into cryptos? Do you have any cryptos?
I actually, for the first time in my life, I was waiting for there to be, quote unquote, a winner to be selected. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as it got mainstream enough that Fidelity was offering it, right? Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, Ethereum, there's another one called Litecoin that I didn't buy, but Ethereum and Bitcoin. I'm like, all right, I'll put in enough that if it's wiped out, it won't hurt me. But I would say in the last 3 or 4 months, I just made an investment of put about 20 grand in a mix between.
Well, it'll do well. It'll do well. Just wait.
Yeah. I'm a buy and hold guy. Like, I don't panic, right? When I first bought Bitcoin, I think I put maybe 10 grand, because I did it in stages. I put about 10 grand in. Within about 2 weeks, it went to 8 grand. And I'm like, just hold the faith.
Oh yeah.
And right now I'm up maybe 10%. I was up maybe 30% at one point. It's fine. Right.
I'll tell you my story.
Yeah, I was about to ask that because my next question was going to be.
I did a target for Courtney Brown. Would have been 2012. And the target was a well-known historical figure about whom it is assumed one story. And my story was different. He died an old man. And so I presented that as a video. And I did a radio show with an author that had written about that. And that author had a source and introduced me to somebody. And that person said, Dick, your data was very good. We know we can validate it. And I go, who are you? And he goes, never mind. He said, you have a good skill. You need to be very careful with that. So he approached me and said, you could have a website where you did remote viewing and people would pay to see it. And I said, oh, hold on. No, wait. No. My teacher told me never get money involved. I'd be hesitant to charge money. If I didn't do a good job, I'd feel bad, the pressure. And he goes, okay. He backed off. Anyway, he said, well, we'll talk sometime. So he called me back a month later, and I didn't know who it was. I almost hung up. He said, this is so-and-so. I talked to you with Harry. Oh, yeah. And he started telling me the history of European nobility. And I was, this is interesting.
Is this our mutual enigmatic friend?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm enraptured because I still want to learn more about it.
So he started giving me a really good education on how the world works and who runs it. And I could sense that he was somebody. And one of the things he told me was, Dick, people with your skill have never had to worry about their creature comforts. They've always been taken care of. And I'll tell you something. This is what you need to know. They're going to change the financial system to cryptocurrency. If you learn about crypto, you and your wife will be very well off. So this was 2017. So I go, okay, I'm going to learn about Bitcoin. Look up. It was just overwhelming. I was like, oh my God. And I went on a trip to Asia and I got back and Bitcoin had gone to 20,000. It went straight up. And then I said, I'm too late. And he said, no, you're not. And so along about 2018 and 2019, based on my conversations with him and my understanding that he knew what he was talking about, I took out my 401k, most of it. I took out a home equity loan. I put it all in cryptos. And what cryptos? The ones that felt good to me intuitively. I didn't know shit about cryptos. I bought Ethereum.
I still don't.
Well, you'll learn about them. You'll learn about them working at.
My classmates would be horrified. I just said my analysis is very simple. It's on Fidelity. Those are two. Litecoin, I don't feel good about it, but so I just ignored that. But Bitcoin and Ethereum are two of the winners. They're going to be here for the long haul.
Yeah.
All I got to do is just park some cash in there, and it'll do what it's going to do.
They're going to be what we call treasury assets. Those will be treasury assets. He told me if you get one Bitcoin for you, one for your wife, and one to play with, you'll be wealthy. So I did that. And it worked out pretty well for me. But man, I did it. If I had to do it again, I don't think I could do it. Like the learning curve, what I went through, the stress I went through to learn about it, to learn how to get a wallet.
Well, you buried the lead, didn't like you bought it and then it just at one point it crashed. Like there was not crash, but there was a time that
where like COVID, in COVID it was like so it's been a really wild ride because put a lot of money in and then COVID came and everything went down. So how to turn your life savings into half of what it was or less. And then, but I knew it would go back up. And then in 2021, it went way up and my wife and I are looking at our wallets going, we're like Rolex, I like that one, like a luxury condo. And we're just looking at what are we going to do with all this money? This is great. And our analyst, Marty, said, Dick, I have a bad feeling.
Take some money off the table. Take some money off the table.
I said, no, it's going to go up higher. And it, for 2 years, 22, 23, it was bad. It was way down. I was like, oh my God, I had my chance and I didn't do it. And so now 2024, it came back up and now it's still going to have wild swings, but just get it and hold it and you'll be fine.
Well, I didn't take out a home equity loan to put it. If I had been in that situation when it was riding high, I would have taken out a portion, paid off the home equity loan, and then let the rest ride. But
my wife I don't gamble, and I'm very cautious.
I'm the same way.
But my wife is just ice in her veins. She used to go to Las Vegas. I'd watch her. I go to Vegas and I put a quarter in a slot machine and feel bad. If I'd make $30, I go, hey, I'm 30 ahead, I quit. She would play 2 hands of blackjack with $100 chips. Just so she said, if you're going to go in, go in. She goes, I believe in it. And so, okay. But I did it by hunches and intuition and it worked out okay. Well, since then, now I know how to, some of them I remote viewed Theta. I bought that at 12 cents. It went way up, went to $16. I didn't take it out, but it'll go back up again, I think. It's a wild ride, crypto. But look, the financial system is going to blockchain. Everything is going to be on distributed ledger. You're going to see, like I just did a YouTube yesterday talking about insurance. I have to up the insurance on my condo for the homeowners association. And trying to find an agent these days, they don't want to be bothered. Pretty soon, like say you're going to do car insurance, you'll fill out your information and it'll be like an Ethereum contract. you'll have a smart contract, and there will be an application that will probably connect to the computer on your car, and the car will report into the blockchain how far you drive, how fast you drive, when you drive, and it'll have your medical history, and your insurance will be based on that in real time, and it'll be automatically calculated on a smart contract. That's coming.
I know,
Everything's gonna be tokenized.
which worries me is given that
There's total control in that. Yeah, you have.
Yeah, like sorry, you're eating too much steak. So
Yeah.
you may be wealthy, but anytime you try to buy a steak, sorry, it's just not going to work.
You had too much cholesterol this month. You're not permitted to have a steak. You've had your limit of steaks. Yeah, we see that your blood pressure's a little high. No, you're going to have to order something else. Yeah, that's not good. That's not good. Or even predictive, like,
Crime.
oh,
Like
we just saw that you bought a bottle of wine and a case of beer at Sam's Club. You better not drive, or we're going to raise your car insurance now because you just bought alcohol.
you might not even be drinking while you're driving,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
just the
but they saw you
correlation.
bought that, so now
Yeah.
your risk goes up. They calculated well, if you didn't, you may not, you bought it, you're probably going to drink it. So our calculation is by the AI says there's a 67.5% probability that you will drink this, and that there is a 39.8% probability that you'll drive with a 0.81 blood alcohol. So your car isn't going to turn on, or your insurance is going to triple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's pretty scary, which is why developing skills like remote viewing are going to be required for survival, in the sense that because the information that we're getting is not 100% correct. I think we can agree
Well, I
on
think
that.
the skill is
media.
the skill is innate in the human. I think humans in an earlier time, they knew the clean waters that way. They just knew. Or there's a storm coming. They could feel it somehow. So take shelter. I was talking with Noah Thompson, who's a Hawaiian navigator. They have a Hawaiian sailing canoe, and they sail around the Pacific Ocean without compasses, with only looking at the stars. Mm-hmm. Like the only navigation is looking at the stars. So he was sailing from Tahiti or the Cook Islands to
By the
Hawaii.
way, they used to teach that at the Naval Academy, and then I think they stopped for a while.
But no, they would take sightings with a sextant.
Yeah, that's true.
The Hawaiians didn't use a sextant because you need a timepiece. They had no timepiece. They just said that the stars are there, we go by this star, and Hawaii's that direction. Anyway, there was a time when they were sailing, and he knew he was on the latitude of Hawaii. So he knew that Hawaii was either east or west. And he didn't know, and he just had to sit there and go, it's to the west. He just knew intuitively. It was a knowing. So that was remote viewing, and he was right, and he found the island. So that's a skill that earlier people had.
Have you ever tried it to apply the principles of remote viewing to summoning animals?
No, but I do things like where I used to live, there was a parcel locker with like 9 or 12 boxes, and there'd be a key in my mailbox, so I wouldn't look at the number on it. I'd just take the key and I'd go, that one, and see if I could figure out which one it was. Or if I'm on an elevator, it's going to stop on the 4th floor and a woman's going to get on. Just little tests like that constantly. Yeah. Like my wife would work at a restaurant, and she would come home between 8:30 and 10 o'clock at night. But I'd feel her coming, and I'd go stand by the door like this. She'd open the front door, and I'd be at the front door. And how do you do that? I said, just.
Apparently dogs do that too.
Dogs do that.
They ran tests.
Not only that,
the dog doesn't race to the front door when they hear your car. They race to the front door when you leave your office, or when you're like get up to leave.
Yeah, they perk up. But not only dogs, tomato plants. If you pull up one tomato plant, the other tomato plants get funky. Yeah, they did an electronic response. So tomato plants are consciousness. Everything's conscious. Some things, I mean, a rock has consciousness in that it can feel vibration. I mean, a rock doesn't have much of a consciousness, but it's sensitive to vibrations. So,
well, the Romans had a word for it. It was genius loci, the spirit of a place. And there are some places that you go to just have like a stain on them. Like you can feel the darkness sometimes. Or alternatively, you can feel, the lightness too. So.
Yep. Well, I got to run. We're going to have some really good projects together, Sean. It's great to be working with you. We're going to go some amazing places. I just queued a new target for your team. Oh, shh. You're not supposed to know. But I haven't seen the presentation. I've seen the data, but I haven't seen the debrief that you did on the robot. I'm sure it's going to be good. But
it's already done. It's already, we already recorded. I did. Also, the debrief is probably in your inbox for the next one, which we haven't recorded yet. So,
we do one a week, man. We do a lot of targets, but that team is going to gel. It's really fun. It's a certain type of camaraderie when you're doing remote viewing work, because it is the really interesting conversations are after our debrief. Is when we do a debrief and then we do a chit chat and then we sign off, and then Edward invariably calls me or I call Edward, and then we're going, man, I was like, because it's an unusual skill and it's a challenge, but it's just cool. It's just good stuff. We love
100%. So anyway, I guess this is going to air on both of our channels. So
yeah. Well,
I'm just going to get a lot of my subscribers going to be angry. Like, why? I thought you were interviewing Dick. Why? And then we'll get to you, and they'll be like, okay. We'll
do a whole. I'm writing a presentation. This will be good for your channel. The presentation is my top 10 remote viewing experiences in 30 years of remote viewing. What I saw, how it felt, what I learn, and what it teaches us about consciousness. So I go over some of the really dramatic. So I'll give you a preview of that as next time we talk. That'll be good. We got this conference coming up in a month or two. Yeah, but we'll do some more in-depth conversations. Basically I wanted this so we can introduce you to future forecasting, but you use it on your channel. It's just good.
100%. So
yeah. Well, Did we explain that? It's like, okay, I'm Dick Allgire, remote viewing with Future Forecasting Group. You have your own channel, but we went and found you and said, hey, you got to come be part of our thing. So we just recruited Sean to be the host of our new remote viewing team. So he's the moderator, the debriefer, and we can get you into analytics too with your military intel background and your intelligence. So,
well, that's what I also prepare. I do the analytics portion. So I host, but I also do the analytics.
One thing that Glenn taught me that I don't think was ever used at the CRV side, like the Fort Meade side, was low-level consensus analysis. And Glenn taught me a method that they used at NSA. And so I'll teach you that sometime. It's you take every bit of data, you take one bit of data from one viewer's session, then you look at every other bit of data to find similar, like, oh, Sean drew a human form. Who else? Derek drew a human form. And Sean said it was involving medical, and Derek said it was treatment. You take that, you take the consensus data, and then you reduce it to its lowest level possible meaning. So you don't take it to a higher level, you take it to a lower level, and that gives you, and then you do scenarios off of that. It's kind of time consuming. AI really helps with that. But
I've been experimenting with AI a little bit. I don't know how accurate it is, but I'll ask it to do something that's somewhat similar. or just kind of scoring, right? Like based on the target, you can't ask it to do probability because it'll lecture you that it doesn't do statistics and this and that. But, qualitatively, what's the percentage likelihood that what the remote viewer was viewing was actually the target? And then sometimes you have to cajole and get it, but it'll ultimately, after much cajoling, provide you with a range for each viewer, etc. So I've been experimenting with that. I don't put the viewers' names. It just says RV1, RV through RV4. But we'll see. We'll see. I don't want people to get too sensitive, so I'm willing to take it out. But it's just, there are ways to try to experiment with AI to find. The other thing, too, is the AI can be wrong, too, right? Yeah. Like, a recent example was on the last target that I did, which I won't discuss here, but there was a word that AI misread, and then AI tried to fit it into the target, and it was like, I can't find where you're seeing that word. Like, it's just not there. It's not there.
Yeah.
It would have been really cool if that word was there and like the connection it made, but it just didn't exist.
Yeah. Well, AI is coming and we've got to adapt to it, and it's a good tool if used correctly. So
100%. 100%. Yep. So anyway, it was an absolute pleasure. Oh, by the way, I didn't even say my channel so I'm the host of Through a Glass Darkly. I cover geopolitics, paranormal, where they cross the paranormal, and then kind of anything in between. So
go I'm looking forward to this. Through a Glass Darkly, Sean Patrick Hazlett. That's how you
Hazlett. Yeah, Hazlett. You're pronouncing it like it's spelled, though, so I never hold that against anybody.
Well, I'm. People call me Dick Allgire and all kind of Allgire. When I was a TV newscaster, that was trying to. I was always worried I'd mispronounce somebody's name. So yeah. Okay, Sean, it's been great talking with you. We're going to have an amazing journey. It's going to be good fun. Hold that Bitcoin and the Ethereum. You'll be happy.
I will. I don't panic.
Yeah.
So.
All right. ffgrv.com and Through a Glass Darkly. There we've promoted our stuff.
100%.
We could talk all day, but I have a guitar I've got to pick up from the luthier. I bought a guitar and it needed some work, and I'm going to go pick it up today. So.
All right, my friend.
I'll see you.
Look forward to many such conversations.
All right.
You too. You as well. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and you can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, And there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.